Welcome to Retro Scale Modelling. This is part 2 of the Revell Hawker Hunter FGA 9 Mark 58. In the first part I opened up the box and made up the copy. In this part I'm going to be putting it all together before the painting stage. So let's jump in and see how we get on. Starting off with the air intake, and it's a Revell 90 silver that I'm using, and this is for the inside. Now, I'm always in two minds whether to paint these or not because you can barely see them and everything's on. But I suppose it's good practice to do so. For the actual main side of the covers, it's 91 steel. The rope blades are the silver, I should have mentioned that. The inside is steel. But as I said, you can't really see it once it's all assembled. The assembly is quite simple, just the two halves together. And then the rotating fan just goes on the end there. There's a little location point in it just to hold it into place. That then gets placed into the main housing. On the Swift one, there's a couple of little fins that go in. Now, after checking the photographs and that, I've realised that both paint schemes actually are the Swiss version of the aircraft. So from this point on, I'll just be doing the Swiss version. These sidewalls are a little bit tricky to fit. They should line up with the air intake funnel there, but they're very difficult to actually get in place because of the shape of them. They sort of have a sweeping bend that goes around and comes back in again. I would suggest only cementing the bottom at this point before the main fitting. As you can see, that's both of them in now, with one side with the little fins. Now the instructions tells you to put them together at this point, put the covering, top covering on it. I wouldn't recommend that. I did try it and it didn't work out so well. So this is the cover going on now, but I did actually take it apart. So that's how it should look like per instructions. But as I said, I took it apart because I couldn't get it to fit this way. So before I fit it, I'm just going to be sanding down the seam lines of the nose section of the aircraft. Now I'm starting off with a rough grade filing stick, then working my way down to extra fine. As you can see there, I've got all my different sanding sticks in a line waiting to be used, and I just take one and go down a grade each time until I'm happy with it. So that's almost done now. It didn't take that long to get rid of the seams. Maybe a little bit more work involved there. Now I've decided to have the landing gear up, so I've taken off the strut, and now it's time to place these in. Now I could not get this to fit. The bottom part of the air intake is meant to go into a groove, but it just doesn't fit the way it should do. It's because the gap between them is very small, so you would have to prise it open. So in the end, as I said, I just took them off and placed the top part in first. I then placed in the bottom half, married it up to the rotating disc before putting it into the slot on the side of the fuselage. It's quite a deep slot for it to fit. The instructions say don't glue that into the slot this time. I misread that. I put a little bit of cement in there, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I've test fitted and I think it'll be okay. On to the next part of the fuselage. There's a little bit of prep work to do here, drilling some little holes to receive the other parts down the line. Because it's a large part of the fuselage, when I'm placing it together, I tend to do this in stages. So I've just put a little bit of cement on the tail and on the bottom part of the fuselage. Once that's done and dried, I'll just carry on with cementing the other part of the fuselage. It just helps you get better control when you're bonding these two halves together. And once the top's done, I do the exact same process with the bottom. Just do it in stages so each part is bonded before I move on to the next. Onto the wings now, and have a look at your instructions if you're doing this kit, and decide now which armaments you're going to be placing on, whether you're going to be putting in the missiles, the bombs, or the fuel drop tanks. Whatever you decide to put on, you have to do it now so that you know which holes you're going to have to pre-drill. Placing the two halves of the wings together is actually quite tricky. It's because of the shape and design of the wing itself that the contact points are not all the way through the wing. Dry fit is essential here to know exactly where you're going to be placing the cement. Don't be afraid to do a little parts at a time, then cement as you go along to ensure that you've got the proper fit. And what I did was I started at one end and just worked my way around until it was all cemented. You will have to clamp this up as well, or hold it for quite a period of time before it's all ready to be worked on. Next to go on are the flaps. So these are fairly simple to place on. The fitting was really good on them. Of course, at this point you can choose to have the flaps open or not. I'm having mine closed up. The next part of the wing is the leading edge, and this is quite a small part. The most important thing to remember here is the one side is longer than the other, well, broader I should say, not longer. So one part will actually stick out a little bit more than you would think was normal. This is how it's meant to be. It's just because of the shape of the bracket on the wing, and of course there's a part of the wing that angles out, and this is what this part is going to be doing. And then I simply just placed it on, and you can see the part just angling out now. Don't be tempted to trim this because it's meant to be like that. And the last part of the wing is just the tips going on now. That is a straight shape, but it fits in perfectly. It doesn't need any work doing to it whatsoever. Back to the main fuselage, it's time to connect both parts together. This just simply slides in. The location connection points are just on the neck there. You may have to hold down each end separately, so the top and bottom, for a better fit. You do have to wiggle it somewhat to get it to meet up, but it does fit quite well. Onto the engine, and it's 91 steel by Revell Aquacolor. You don't have to paint all of this, just the bottom end of the parts here. Even then, you can probably get away with not painting it, but I would recommend painting it. And it's the same with the inner part. However, make sure you paint this part because this will be more visible. Once the paint's dried, I'm using Tamiya's Weathering Master Series D, and I'm using the burnt blue component. I'm just putting a little bit on my sharpener and gently going over the painted area to give that blue burnt metal look. I then go over it with the burnt red pigment on the same series, predominantly more on the edges of the unit to simulate where the flame would be more prominent on the actual metal part. And I simply feather it down onto the blue so it looks like it's all blending into one. To build this part, the instructions say put the centerpiece in first before closing up the two halves. After a bit of dry fitting, I found it better to do it the other way, so I'm closing these parts up first before fitting the central piece. That way it's easier to close up. And once it's dry, just simply pop in the middle section inside a little bit of cement to hold it, and as you can see, it fits perfectly in there, and it just makes it so much easier for the outer shell to come together. So next to the undercarriage, and I'm placing on the landing gear bay covers here. Initially, as I said in the other video, I was going to have it with the wheels down, but in the end I decided to have the wheels up. The reason for it is just easier for painting really and storage. So the covers go on quite easily, there's no drama with them, they fit really well. And it was the same for the covers on the wings also. These ones come in 3 different sections, not 2. At first I thought they'd be missed a part because I couldn't find it, but in the end I found it on the sprue. And again, like the one on the nose of the plane, they went in relatively easy. Be careful not to press them down too firmly though, because they'll collapse inside. You may want to put something inside the cavity where the landing gear would be, so that wouldn't happen. Next to go on is the air brake. Now, confession time here, I actually put this in the wrong position. It should have went down below further back on the fuselage. I did catch it in time before it set, and I did reposition it. The instruction went wrong. I just got it wrong. I didn't pay attention to where it was actually meant to go. So as you can see, I've already moved it down on the fuselage near towards the tail end, and now I'm just placing on some of the little aerofoils that go around the bottom of the aircraft. The kit gives you a couple of different options here for these parts. Now, the photos I've looked at, on the Swiss one, it has the longer tank than the RAF one, and other photos it has the shorter one. So I decided to go for the shorter one in the end, only because I'd already cut them off the sprue, if I'm absolutely honest. So now I'm also putting on the weapons. This is the gun ports at the bottom of the fuselage, and then it's back to the top, and I'm putting more of the framework on. This puts into the tail fin runoff and goes right up to the back of the seat of the cockpit, and then the engine pops on. I love this design actually of placing the engine on. It went on really well. There was no gapping issues whatsoever. It just slotted in without any problems. So it's onto the wings now, and first of all I'm assembling the tail wings. And once they were dry, they just slotted in nicely. I didn't have to modify the route of the wing. Sometimes you have to thin it down a little bit, the location pin, just to get them fitted, but this one just slotted in quite nicely. And same with the main wing as well. It's a strange design really, how they fit in, but they fitted perfectly. There won't be any need for filler. And once the wings are on, it's just a case of placing a couple of little airfoils onto the wing. I'm not putting the probes or anything on. I will do them right at the last, so that they don't get snapped off while I'm handling the model. And now for the canopy, time to mask it. I've got my orange cutting board here. All the little lines and little grooves in this board enables you to cut masking tape in thin strips, and a nice clean cut as well. You need to use a sharp knife though to do it. So all I do is put a bit of tape down and then run a knife along the grid there, and I get a nice clean cut. And then I just simply take the strip of masking tape and follow the contours of the canopy and just press it in as I go along. Then I'll cut off any excess with the sharp knife. And I'll do that with each panel on the canopy, as you can see there. Then I simply just fill in the area in the middle. So now the canopy is done, so all it remains is to place it on. So as you can see there, it's all filled in, and it's just a matter of placing it on. Now I've used normal glue here to put it on, but making sure that I've left it at least a minute for any fumes to evaporate, so it doesn't clog up the actual canopy. I'll bring the video to an end here now the canopy is going on. I'll go off and give it another spray undercoat, and then next stage will be the painting stage. So if you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for my other builds, or indeed for the first part of this build. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll be notified of all my upcoming builds and updates for this build as well, of course. Hit that like button, and of course leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.